Hello, my name is Evan Rosenberg. I'm Senior Manager for Business Development with SRECTrade. And today I'll be talking about how you can generate an ongoing revenue stream for your electric vehicle fleet using clean fuel programs, a unique incentive program that currently exists in both British Columbia and across Canada federally. A little bit of background on SRECTrade. We're an environmental commodity management firm. We help owners of renewable energy and clean transportation assets, so think solar panels, EV charging stations, generate and monetize carbon credits from the equipment that they operate. Since the company's inception, we've generated, transacted, and paid out over $800 million in environmental commodity value to our clients, either through assets that we generate credits for or transacted on our platform. Our focus today is just going to be on one type of environmental commodity program. Those are clean fuel programs. Under the California Low Carbon Fuel Standard, which is the first type of clean fuel program in North America, and has been around the longest and is probably the most successful so far, SRECTrade is the largest third-party manager of EV charging assets under that program. We're also part of a larger company called Expansive. Expansive operates an exchange for environmental commodities, the largest in the world. Together, SRECTrade and Expansive are a single source for managing, sourcing, transacting, and monetizing environmental commodities. So what is a clean fuel program or clean fuel standard? You'll hear different terms to describe these programs, and they're all essentially very similar and have some similar themes. So a clean fuel program is a market-based compliance program that which is established by a government that reduces the carbon intensity of transportation fuels by creating incentives for producing and using lower carbon fuels, such as electricity, hydrogen, and renewable natural gas. One important term to highlight here is carbon intensity. And it's a pretty simple idea. It's the measure of emissions of a fuel through its entire life cycle. So not just what comes out of the tailpipe, but all of the carbon emissions associated with the extraction, refining, production, transportation, and finally end use of a specific fuel. Sometimes it's referred to as well to wheel. So from all the emissions from the well all the way through the wheel. Under a clean fuel standard, there's a carbon intensity benchmark. Fuels that have a carbon intensity above the benchmark will generate deficits. So you can think diesel and gasoline. Now, fuels that have a carbon intensity lower than the benchmark will generate credits. Those are things like electricity, hydrogen, and biofuels. Each year, the carbon intensity benchmark gets stricter, meaning there will be more and more deficits created. In order to be in compliance with the program, if you're a petroleum industry participant, you'll need to either reduce the carbon intensity of your own fuels or purchase credits from those that are producing them. So for petroleum industry, a low carbon fuel standard acts more like a compliance program, whereas on the low carbon transportation side, it acts more like an incentive program. Now, SRECTrade works with the low carbon fuel transportation side by generating and monetizing credits, creating an ongoing revenue stream for accelerating the deployment of low carbon fuels. So where do these programs currently exist? This map is useful in showing how much they've expanded across North America. As I mentioned earlier, the first program was in California. Oregon adopted a clean fuel standard soon thereafter, and so too did British Columbia. Now, we have a program in Canada for the entire country, and the rest of the United States is also considering legislation. We might see some more programs pop up in 2023, 2024. They've been very successful policy strategies for reducing transportation emissions and also creating a new clean fuel sector. So they support the economy of these jurisdictions, but they also help reduce emissions in the transportation space, which is typically the largest single source of emissions. Today's conversation will really focus on the British Columbia Low Carbon Fuel Standard and the Canada Clean Fuel Regulations. So under these programs, what kinds of electric vehicle charging are eligible for credit generation? Well, the good news is actually most of them. This includes private and commercial fleets, transit fleets, employee charging, so school buses, electric trucks, even material and cargo handling equipment, such as forklifts, might be eligible under these programs, but also public charging, residential EV charging, and that even includes plug-in hybrids. What's most important to remember about eligibility is that it's the charging station that is actually the eligible asset, not the vehicle itself. And in order to generate credits, you will have to be able to monitor and report the amount of charging that occurs at the station level and report that to the regulator. It's also important to note that only one entity is allowed to generate credits for a given piece of charging equipment. Typically, the default entity will be the owner of that charging equipment, and the entity that also has access to the data that drives credit generation. There's other kinds of low carbon fuels that are eligible as well. On the bottom here, we're looking at renewable natural gas and other kinds of biofuels, but also hydrogen fueling and CNG fueling. Now, each program handles eligibility and default credit generator a little bit different. So this is one of the areas where we recommend you take the time to review program materials or reach out to SRECTrade so we can help evaluate what kinds of equipment would be eligible under these programs. And note that these programs do change over time. And so they may add and even remove different kinds of equipment based on how the regulator wants to incent market activity. So probably one of the most important questions is, what the heck are these things worth? And it's a challenging question. There's two important things to note. First, the number of credits you might generate from EV charging depends on how much charging you do. The more charging, the more credits. The other thing is that these are market-based programs. So the credits are actually changing in value every single day. So it's hard to predict or forecast what these credits are worth. But in the history of these programs, they've been extremely valuable. For the Canada Clean Fuel Regulations, so that's the federal program, we put together sort of an estimate based on what we think these credits might be worth. Now, that program's just started June 20th, 2022, and the first cycle of credit generation hasn't even occurred yet. So there isn't actually any market data available. But assuming a credit price in the range of $50 to $100 per credit, which is consistent with other programs, you might expect annual revenue of anywhere from a couple $100 to over $1,000, couple $1,000 per charger or per vehicle. Again, we might expect that a commercial fleet would be using electricity much more than, let's say, a public charger. And so that's why those values are higher. Now, again, this is just for the Canada federal program. The BC LCFS is a completely separate market. So those credits are worth a different value and not interchangeable. And in fact, that credit is much, much higher right now. And so you might even expect those credits and that charging to be a lot more valuable. One of the things we can help do is provide an analysis based on, again, the kinds of equipment you have, the amount of charging you're reporting, and put together longer-term projections. But one of the things to really become comfortable with is the uncertainty in the value. You might be familiar with grants and rebates and incentives where you might know how much you'll earn or how much you'll get, whereas these clean fuel programs really do fluctuate over time. The trade-off is that it's ongoing. It's not a one-time revenue stream. It's actually ongoing year after year after year. And right now, these programs don't really expire. And also, they're not funded by any government funding. So they're very consistent and stable in terms of whether they're going to be there or not. Now, when it comes to credit prices, there are ways that you can hedge the value. So you can enter into what we would call a forward contract. So what that means is you enter into an agreement with someone to buy a certain number of credits at a certain price at a certain time, or I guess sell a certain number of credits at a certain price at some time in the future. Obviously, that's a little bit more complex of an arrangement, but that is something that we see and something SRECTrade can facilitate on your behalf. So a little bit more about what SRECTrade does, and a little bit more explanation about what it's like to participate in a clean fuel program. So what are the kinds of activities you might have to do in order to achieve, see those revenues? So one of the first things we'll do is a fleet evaluation, right? So what kinds of equipment do you have? How much utilization for that equipment are you expecting, or do you already have? And we'll put together an assessment for you. But then we'll get to work. And the key things you have to do under these programs is register your equipment. So each charging station has to be registered under the program as a unique piece of equipment. And then on an annual basis, report the amount of fuel consumed at each piece of equipment. So you'll need to be able to pull kilowatt hours for each piece of charging data, or piece of charging equipment. Now, depending on this type of software you have on that fueling station, that might be very, very simple, and we can even automate how that data is pulled, or it might be a little bit more difficult. So networked chargers or smart chargers are definitely a lot easier here, and in fact, sometimes required in order to pull the data that you need to generate credits. When working with SRECTrade, we'll walk you through exactly what kinds of software and reporting requirements will work. We'll pull that data on your behalf or receive it from you, and then upload it into the program registry where we've registered your equipment. We'll create credits. They're issued on an annual basis, and then sell those credits on your behalf. And what SRECTrade does is we act as an aggregator. So we'll generate lots and lots of credits across many, many different customers who have charging stations. And any one charging station or any one fleet may not be generating that many credits on its own, but by aggregating a lot of credits and selling those in large blocks to the credit buyers, we make the transactions a lot easier. As you can imagine, if you're an oil and gas company, you don't want to make lots and lots of little transactions for credits. You want to buy larger blocks of credit. So we make it a lot easier. So essentially what we'll do is from start to finish, all the work required to generate and monetize these credits. In addition, we're involved in these programs. We stay very, very close to the programs. They have, every few years, they will review their policies and potentially adopt new ones. And so there's a lot of policy and market tracking that gets involved in these programs. And we'll also do that on your behalf, putting out information that's relevant to you that might affect your decision-making so you can continue to plan your fleet electrification program. But with SRECTrade, we take all the responsibility of actually participating in this program, manage all of that on your behalf, and allow you to continue to operate your fleet, manage and plan your transition, and essentially just requiring you to provide information about your assets and your consumption on a very limited basis throughout the year. And then most importantly, I kind of forgot this most important piece, we pay you, right? So we'll generate the credits, sell the credits, and then pay you the revenue that we receive. And we do all of this with no out-of-pocket costs. So we take a small percentage of the revenue that we generate on your behalf and then give you the rest. So you never get an invoice or a bill. We simply just send you a check once those credits have been sold. Now, one of the most important things to consider for clean fuel programs and working with a third party like SRECTrade is making sure that there's some transparency into how we're serving you. So one of the ways that SRECTrade has managed this is to create an online platform that gives you visibility into all of the work that we're doing on your behalf, including the assets we've registered for you, the credits that we've generated for each asset, how much we sold those credits for, and the amount of fees we took from the revenue. So you get to see all of those pieces of information. You can download it at any time. You can use that in your own reporting, and we make it really easy to access that information. So both the BC LCFS and Canada Federal Program are open, but you can only generate credits once you're registered and during the current reporting period. These programs have annual reporting periods. So if you miss the deadline, you will miss out on an entire year's worth of credit generation and revenue. So we recommend getting started right away if you have existing assets that you think are eligible or that you know are eligible. And if you don't know whether they're eligible, that's something we can help evaluate for you. At least with SRECTrade, we make it very, very easy to get started. There's really just a few easy steps. And we recommend that you reach out to us at cleanfuels@srectrade.com to understand a little bit more about how we can serve you. In my experience in these programs, the value accrues over time. So even if you have just a few assets, right, just a couple EV chargers, we highly recommend you have a plan for how you're going to participate in these programs. Even if you're right now doing a broad fleet electrification plan, right, maybe a 5 or 10 year study, clean fuel programs should be part of that study. How you're going to participate, benefit, and utilize the revenue from that program is an important piece, just like all the other incentives that you're evaluating. Of course, this one's a little bit unique because you have to participate in the market, but you really need to consider how the clean fuel programs are going to work for your electrification program. And the good news for BC is that you can actually participate in both the BC program and the federal program at the same time. So the same amount of charging can be reported under both programs and generate credits and generate revenue. So that's a really unique opportunity for the folks that have charging in BC. If you have charging assets in other provinces too, those will generate credits under the federal program, obviously, but not the BC program. So we hope this has been an informative couple minutes presentation. Again, this is a really important part of accelerating your EV charging and fleet electrification. Please contact us at cleanfuels@srectrade.com if you have any more questions or are looking to get started. We'll be happy to walk you through all the opportunities you have so you can make the right kinds of decisions in accelerating your program. Now, I believe we'll pause and have some questions. I'm happy to answer those here on this discussion or at another time. Thank you.